feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
Alright everybody, and welcome back to the channel. So you guys know that we've been testing some stuff from Recoil recently, some speakers and stuff, and I reached out to Ron and said, hey, you know, I noticed that you guys have a lot of stuff. Like if you go on their website, they have a ton of stuff. And so one of the things that I think people overlook when doing installs, whether you're a professional installer or just kind of an enthusiast hobby guy, or you're just doing one install, is you overlook some of the errors that can be made and some of the problems that can arise when installing stuff, especially if you're a hi-fi redo guy like me and you've got some old gear and, you know, maybe it's not really clear how the switches work, you don't have user manuals for them and stuff. So there's some really cool equipment out there for doing this stuff, and one of the main things we're going to show you today is Recoil has what is an MST1. And this thing's a multimeter, and it is really, really cool. It's got a lot of features, and it does a lot of different things. So we're gonna go over all the different features that this thing has, along with some of the other stuff that Recoil makes. And this meter, 200 bucks. And you can use it like an ohm meter, multimeter. It does signal generator, test tones, and stuff like that too. So we'll go over some of those things, you know, like how you would actually use this thing. So that's pretty cool. And it comes with a bunch of different test probes and things that you attach to the meter itself. Not really much for instructions, but comes with its own test tone little USB stick. So, and Ron was gracious enough to send me some stuff here that they also make, and these things are cool. So if you're working on your bench or whatever, you got these silicone trays so your screws don't fall out. You put stuff in here. Really cool, especially if you're working, you know, on the outside of your vehicle. You can actually set this thing down and it doesn't move or scratch anything. So that's really a cool, really nice piece. And these things aren't very expensive. And got a ginormous one here. This thing's really super cool. So, you know, this thing you can carry it around. You can do a lot of other stuff. If you do any soldering or anything like that, and you know you need a good spot to stick, you know, amplifier boards or whatever you're working on, the solder won't melt the silicone or anything like that. So cool little deal. Thank you, Ron. I appreciate it. And something that I had around from Recoil for a long time that I've used many times are their component speaker baffles. And these things are really super cool. You may have seen these on our board. I just put them on there just for the heck of it. So your speaker goes inside here, and then you've got this raised part, and that's your door panel will seal. This thing kind of pushes in and it will seal to it. It makes sure the sound has only one direction to go. And then on the back side, it helps keep any moisture or anything from going into the speaker. And then they give you some foam pads that you stick directly behind the speaker. If there's a panel, a quarter panel, a door panel, or the inside of the door, whatever. This really just keeps the sound waves from reflecting back out. So cool stuff. So we're gonna start with the meter here, and we're gonna go over to the bench and, you know, test out some of the features of it. All right, so we've got the MST1 here on the bench, and the first thing we're going to test out is the tone generator, and it's really simple. You just turn this thing on, and it's got a menu of all its different features, and you just hit enter. And so one of the things that the tone generator you can do is you can have it just do these test leads out, or you can do RCAs. And one of the cool things is if you do RCAs, you can run it into your amp, and you can tell if your input signal is not right or you got a problem, whether it's your amp or whatever. I actually used this feature the other day. I couldn't tell if I didn't have an input signal from the head unit to the amplifier, so I took this unit with its RCAs, put it on a tone generator, and I hit enter, and it makes a tone, and you can adjust the frequency of that tone. I'll show you in just a second. And it was like, well, is the amp not getting a signal? Is the amp blown up, or is it the speakers? Well, I was able to determine that it was getting a signal in, and the problem was the amp, not the speakers. So in this case, if you, let's say you've got wires in your car, okay, and you don't know if they go to the right side, the left side, or what, you're gonna hook up your amp or your head unit or whatever you're gonna hook up. Take these alligator probes, do this, put it on tone generator, go over there and see what you got for a signal coming out. And this is pretty cool. You can change. You can change the frequency, and also you can use this, believe it or not, to test crossovers and do some other stuff too. So one of the things that I have done with the tone generator before was to see if I had a difference in the right and left bias, or different channels weren't set at the right level. So I actually used my little handheld SPL meter. This little guy. And so I just ran the tone generator as an input signal, and then I just went to the different speakers and just compared the actual reading from each one. And it told me that there was an issue with the amplifier gain setup in there, and so I was able to determine that. So these are some pretty handy tools. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to go over the distortion detector. All right, once again, we're going to hit distortion detector, and it's going to bring us here, and this thing's going to detect the input voltage. You're going to use this kind of like you'd use a multimeter and an oscilloscope, and it kind of does both. And we're going to find the clipping point of this amplifier and what the volume level is on this unit, and we can adjust the gains accordingly by doing that. So we're going to run this thing through just a little test to see, kind of show you, demonstrate how this thing reacts when you do hit clipping or distortion. Okay, so it's on, it's detecting it through, you can see the input voltage there. And so you can see we can turn it back down and it's good, right? Turn it up, we got clipping. So the head unit is clipping at around, volume is at 20. So this is a pretty useful tool for setting your gains, because sometimes you can't hear that distortion, and that's what's going to damage your speakers, and it's also going to sound like garbage too. So knowing the limits of your head unit and setting the gains on your amplifier accordingly. So we know that this thing's clean up to 29, okay? We know that this amplifier is clean up to about 20. So if we want a larger range on our volume, okay, so we're not going to run it into clipping, what we would probably do is turn the gain down on this thing, which would allow us to run this thing up to a higher level. And usually on the Alpine head units, I usually run them around 20. So this thing's already been set up for, other tests and other things that I did. So let's go down the list and see what else this thing does. All right, and we're going to use this meter to determine if we've got the polarity, aka the phase of the speakers, correct, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to use a test track that makes like kind of a weird beeping sound, and these lights are going to tell us if we've got the speaker hooked up right. So it looks like we've got the speaker hooked up right. So if it wasn't, those lights would be red. So this is kind of cool. This is a very useful thing because
you know, once you install all your speakers, you really should run this thing. And then this thing has a microphone on the very front of it, and you just go and you put it up against the speakers and test them individually. And so there is one more feature with this phase tester that you can actually, if you have a speaker and you don't know which is the plus and which is the minus on it, this thing will tell you. I'm going to show you how to do that. All right, in phase testing mode, okay, we're going to go in here and then we're going to toggle over to single speaker phase. So now this thing is going to generate a signal, and now we need to look at that signal. So I purposely hooked this thing up wrong, and you can see how the lights are red. So it knows that this thing's wrong. So now we're going to switch the wires around and show you what it looks like when the polarity's right. So I switched them around and now they're green. So this is pretty cool because I've had some speakers, even this one here, where it's really tough to tell which is the plus and which is the minus. All right, so now this thing, we're going to be able to measure voltage with this thing, just like a normal VOM. So on DC, we can check our 12-foot inputs here. You can see this is our voltage that we've got at the test bench. It'll also measure AC voltage, and your amplifier actually puts out AC voltage on the speaker leads. So if you were setting your gains, you could check, check your output of the actual speaker leads with this thing as well too. So that's pretty cool. All right, so this thing is actually a continuity tester as well. So if we take the two probes and we connect them together, so if you're trying to like hunt down wires and see if they're, if this one end of the wire is connected to, the other end, see if they're on the same line, what you do is you'd put the test probes on one end of the wire and the other end of the wire, and then you hit the test, and since they're touching, they pass. If they're not touching, we hit enter and they fail. So this doesn't tell us how many ohms or anything like that. It's just a continuity tester. And so anyways, that's kind of a cool feature as well. So one of the other things I think we can do on this thing here as we return is resistance testing, which is similar, right? So what we do is we got the resistance tester, and let's say we have a speaker and we want to see if it's good, or maybe we don't know if it's a 4 ohm, a 2 ohm, or whatever speaker. We just hook this thing up, right? Right there. 3.5 ohms on this old subwoofer. Okay.
So what do you guys think? I think it's a pretty handy tool. I think I'm going to find myself using this thing a lot. I do a lot of troubleshooting with this old gear and even new gear. And, having a way to test some of this stuff is really important to accurately do it. I get people that come by all the time and want me to listen to their systems and, be like, something's going on a little funny. One speaker's louder than the other because it's out of phase, and polarity's wrong, gains aren't set very high or set correctly, getting things going into clipping. People, some of these things are, seem kind of, amateur or whatnot, but having testing equipment to, properly do this and relatively easy. I mean, this thing's small. And I'll tell you what, that polarity checker where you stick it on that beep track and stick it up to the speaker, that thing's awesome. I mean, that is great. I mean, any installer, anytime you install, not even just a professional installer, anybody, you install a system, man, I tell you what, you need to load that track on there and go around to your speakers and check them all. That's pretty serious stuff. And then, obviously setting your gains. There's 100 videos out there, setting your gains. And, I generally set them by ear. And, you know, I try to get, you know, the volume of the head unit at about 3/4 level. I generally use Alpine head units, so I know they're pretty trusty at that volume. But, you know, if you've got something that maybe isn't, you know, using this the distortion detector to find out when that head unit's clipping, you know, so you know your range of volume that you can use, and then you set your gains on your amplifier accordingly. And also, once you've got them kind of set, you know, go ahead and check at the amplifier. So you're going to check at the speaker level output of the amplifier where that thing is clipping. And, you know, that's a great tool. So anyways, thank you to Recoil. I'm pretty impressed with, you know, their product offering that they've got. They offer a lot of stuff. Hopefully we're going to get some of their amplifiers in here pretty soon to test, and their subwoofers. And, you know, I think they offer a pretty good lineup of stuff from very entry level to, you know, pretty decent stuff for sure. And I, you know, the people at Recoil have been in the car audio industry for a long time, so I think they know what they're doing. So anyways, thank you to those guys for letting me try this stuff out. And, you know, for $200, you know, I think I would go ahead and pick one up and keep it in your toolbox. So anyways, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. You know, follow us on Facebook. We post some cool stuff on Facebook. And by the way, that's how you guys can interact with me. I get a lot of messages back and forth on Messenger, and people post stuff. And I'm pretty cool about, you know, conversations and people asking me questions and sharing stuff too. I'd like to see you guys sharing more stuff of your equipment, your stuff, your builds, your installs. So, you know, I look forward to that, you know. So we've got some new stuff coming up here. I want you to keep watching. And, you know, we're like going different angles and different stuff. We'll continue to bring you the old school stuff, the new school stuff, and some install stuff. And we're looking at having a get together here. I'm in Northern California, and we're going to do a show with a local stereo shop. So watch for that. Anyways, catch you next time.